At the awards dinner, they asked, "Why is she even here?" So I placed the Medal of Honor on the table. In the grand ballroom of the Delacorte Veterans Club in Annapolis, Maryland, the military elite gathers for an evening of honors and polished smiles. Crisp uniforms, rehearsed applause, and carefully guarded reputations fill the room. Sitting alone near the kitchen door is Autumn Pierce, a 27-year-old American woman with fiery red hair, subtle scars on her hands, and eyes that have seen more than anyone there would dare imagine. She wasn't invited. She was tolerated. When her name appears on the guest list, a decorated officer's wife leans over and mutters with disdain, "Why is she even here?" The question spreads like smoke. Autumn rises without a word. From the inside pocket of her blazer, she pulls out a small velvet box. Calmly, she walks to the center table and places the most sacred recognition in the U.S. military, the Medal of Honor. Silence sweeps the room. In that instant, glances shift, whispers die, and a story buried in the classified files of a forgotten mission in Afghanistan begins to resurface. Autumn isn't here for attention. She's here for everything that was done, and everything that was denied. For the lives she saved, for the orders she defied, and for those who will, tonight, finally have to face her. This is not just a story about war. It's about silence, survival, invisible courage, and the moment a woman stops hiding. Watch her story unfold and feel every word she never got to say. Subscribe for more raw, powerful narratives that deserve to be heard. Chapter 1. The Uninvited. The April evening settled over Annapolis with the kind of gentle warmth that made Maryland Springs famous. Cherry blossoms scattered their pale pink confetti across the stone pathways leading to the Delacorte Veterans Club, a colonial-style building whose brick facade had witnessed generations of military celebrations. Tonight was no different. At least, that's what the guest list suggested. Inside the grand ballroom, crystal chandeliers cast honey light over round tables draped in navy blue linens. The room hummed with the confident murmur of America's military elite. Admirals with salt and pepper hair sharing war stories, decorated officers with chests full of ribbons laughing at inside jokes, and their spouses, elegant in formal attire, orchestrating the social chess game that accompanied every official function. Captain James Harrington, the evening's host and chairman of the Veterans Recognition Committee, moved through the crowd with practiced ease. His silver hair was cut in the same style he'd worn for 30 years, and his dress blues fit as perfectly as they had when he'd received his first command. He nodded at a colleague when he noticed something unusual, or rather, someone. Near the kitchen entrance sat a woman he didn't recognize. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with auburn hair that fell just below her shoulders in loose waves. She wore a simple black blazer over a cream blouse, modest yet elegant. But it was her posture that caught his attention, straight-backed yet somehow at ease, as if she belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. Her hands, resting on the table, bore the subtle marks of someone who had worked with them extensively. "Who invited her?" whispered Elaine Montgomery, wife of Admiral Montgomery, appearing at Harrington's elbow. Her voice carried the unmistakable note of social territoriality. Harrington consulted his mental guest list. "I'm not certain. Perhaps she is with the Pearsons?" "She's not with anyone," Elaine replied, her diamond earrings catching the light as she tilted her head. "She arrived alone, gave her name at the door as Autumn Pierce." The name registered somewhere in the back of Harrington's mind, but he couldn't place it. He made a mental note to check with the door staff later. Across the room, Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Winters, one of the few female senior officers present, noticed the exchange of glances directed at the solitary woman. She excused herself from her conversation and made her way toward the kitchen tables. the ones usually reserved for staff or last-minute additions. "Mind if I join you?" Rebecca asked, pulling out a chair without waiting for permission. Autumn Pierce looked up, her green eyes sharp with intelligence. "You don't have to do this, Colonel Winters." Rebecca paused, surprised at being recognized. "Have we met before?" A small, enigmatic smile touched Autumn's lips. "No, but I've read your paper on tactical response protocols in civilian-dense areas. Your recommendations saved lives." Rebecca studied the younger woman with new interest. "You're military?" "Was," Autumn replied simply, offering nothing more. Their conversation was interrupted by the tinkling of crystal as Captain Harrington called for attention. The awards ceremony was beginning, a celebration of distinguished service and heroism that the Delacorte hosted annually. As Harrington began his speech about honor and sacrifice, Rebecca noticed something change in her tablemate's expression, a hardening around the eyes, a slight tension in her jaw. "And so tonight, we recognize those who exemplify the highest traditions of American military service," Harrington was saying, his voice practiced and resonant. "Is that what we're doing?" Autumn murmured, so quietly that only Rebecca heard. The awards proceeded with military precision. Golden pins, certificates of honor, and commemorative medals were presented with appropriate solemnity. Polite applause followed each recipient. During a brief intermission, as servers refreshed water glasses and wine was poured, Elaine Montgomery and Catherine Harris, another officer's wife, took seats at a nearby table. Their voices, pitched to carry just far enough, sliced through the ambient chatter. "I checked the guest list," Elaine said, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she gestured subtly toward Autumn. Apparently, she was added last minute by the Veterans Affairs liaison. Catherine raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Why is she even here? These events are for honoring tradition, not for—" She let the sentence dangle, her implication clear. Rebecca Winters felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment at her colleague's behavior. She turned to apologize, but Autumn was already standing, her movement fluid and deliberate. Without a word, she reached into the inner pocket of her blazer and withdrew a small velvet box, worn slightly at the edges. The room continued its chatter, oblivious, as she walked calmly to the central table where Harrington sat with the other senior officers. She placed the box on the table and opened it. Inside, nestled against navy blue velvet, lay the Medal of Honor, its 5-pointed star hanging from a light blue ribbon patterned with 13 white stars. The conversation nearest to the table died first, then spread outward like a wave until the entire ballroom fell silent. Captain Harrington stared at the medal, then at Autumn's face, recognition finally dawning in his eyes. "Miss Pierce," he said, his voice suddenly less certain. "Captain," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "I believe this is the part of the evening where we recognize those who exemplified the highest traditions of American military service." She repeated his words back to him without mockery, but with a quiet intensity that filled the silent room. Rebecca Winters stood up from her chair, drawn forward by a force she couldn't name. Others began to rise as well, not understanding what was happening, but sensing its importance. Autumn looked around the room, making brief eye contact with those nearest to her. When she spoke again, her voice was clear and carried to every corner of the ballroom. "My name is Autumn Pierce. 5 years ago, I served as a combat medic in Kunar Province, Afghanistan. Some of you know my story. Most of you don't, but tonight, that changes." The room remained utterly still, every eye fixed on this unexpected central figure, a woman who had arrived uninvited, but who now commanded the attention of everyone present with nothing but a small velvet box and the weight of unspoken history. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt overlooked, or wondered about the untold stories of those who serve in silence, subscribe to our channel. In the next chapter, we'll journey back to Afghanistan to discover what happened on that classified mission, how Autumn Pierce earned the nation's highest military honor, and why her story was buried. Some tales deserve to be heard, and some heroes refuse to remain invisible. Join us as we continue The Medal on the Table, Chapter 2, The Valley of Shadows. Kunar Province, Afghanistan, 5 years earlier. The mountains rose like jagged teeth against a sapphire sky, beautiful and treacherous. Autumn Pierce felt the weight of her medical pack as she climbed behind the special operations team she'd been assigned to for this mission. At 22, she was the youngest member of the 12-person unit and the only woman, facts that faded into irrelevance in the field but never quite disappeared. "How you holding up, Doc?" asked Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves, dropping back to walk beside her. His face was weathered from multiple deployments, but his eyes still held a kindness that made him the unofficial big brother of the unit. "I'm good," Autumn replied, adjusting her helmet. "Just trying to make sense of this mission change. We were supposed to be back at base by now." Marcus nodded, keeping his voice low. "Command said the intel couldn't wait. High-value target in the village up ahead." Their original assignment, a 3-day reconnaissance patrol, had unexpectedly stretched into its 5th day when new orders came through. Their team was now directed to a small village nestled in a narrow valley, allegedly harboring a Taliban commander. Captain Davis Hayes, their team leader, signaled a halt as they reached a ridge overlooking the village. Hayes was West Point educated, ambitious, and meticulous about following protocol. He had never particularly warmed to having a female medic assigned to his team, but he respected Autumn's competence. "We'll move in after dark," Hayes announced as they gathered around a rudimentary map. "Quick extraction of the target. Should be clean." Lieutenant Connor, Hayes' second in command, studied the village through binoculars. "Sir, I'm counting at least 15 structures. Intelligence wasn't specific about which building." Hayes frowned. "We'll sweep systematically. Alpha Team takes the north side, Bravo takes the south." Autumn scanned the village below, something tugging at her instincts. "Captain, those aren't military compounds. Those are family homes." "Your concern is noted, Pierce," Hayes replied curtly. "We have our orders." As dusk fell, they moved silently down the ridge. The night vision cast the world in an eerie green glow as they entered the village. The first few buildings yielded nothing but sleeping families, who were quietly secured and moved to central rooms. Autumn stayed with Bravo Team, her medical kit ready. They had cleared 3 structures when she heard it, the distinctive wheezing of a child struggling to breathe. She paused outside a small room where a young girl, perhaps 7 years old, lay on a pallet. The child's mother sat beside her, pressing cool cloths to her forehead. "Lieutenant Connor, this child needs medical attention," she whispered. Connor glanced at the child, then at his watch. "Not our mission, Doc. Keep moving." But Autumn had already dropped to her knees beside the girl, taking vital signs. "She has acute respiratory distress, likely pneumonia." The mother's eyes widened with fear, then hope as she realized Autumn was a doctor. She spoke rapidly in Pashto. "She says the girl has been sick for 3 days," translated Private Malik, their interpreter. "No medicine in the village." Autumn opened her pack and began administering emergency treatment. "Tell her I'm giving her daughter antibiotics and something to reduce the fever." Connor stood in the doorway, tension radiating from him. "Pierce, we don't have time for this." 2 minutes, she replied without looking up, administering medication through an improvised IV. Just then their radios crackled. Hayes' voice came through, tight with urgency. "All units, we have a situation. Building 7 Northern Compound." Autumn finished stabilizing the child, gave hurried instructions to the mother through Malik, then rejoined the team as they converged on the Northern Compound. What they found changed everything. The building wasn't housing a Taliban commander. Instead, they discovered 15 children and young women, chained and malnourished. Human trafficking victims being held for transport across the border. Hayes stood in the center of the room, his face a mask of controlled rage as he spoke into his radio. "Command, this is Whiskey 6. Intel was incorrect. No HVT. Repeat, no high-value target. We have a humanitarian situation. Request immediate guidance." The response came through moments later. "Whiskey 6, this is command. Maintain your original objective. That village is still a suspected Taliban waypoint. Complete your sweep and return to base." Hayes hesitated, visibly struggling with the order. Sir, we have civilians in need of medical evacuation. Negative, Whiskey 6. Area is too hot for medvac. Complete your mission and withdraw. The radio went silent. Hayes looked at the captives, then at his team. You heard command. We secure these people as best we can, leave them supplies, and move out at dawn. Autumn stepped forward. Captain, these people need immediate medical attention. Several won't survive another day without proper care. And what do you suggest, Pierce? Hayes's voice was tight. Disobey direct orders? Call in helicopters to a hot zone? If necessary, yes. Her response was quiet but firm. The room fell silent. Marcus Reeves moved to stand beside Autumn. Sir, Doc's right. We can't leave them. Lieutenant Connor joined Hayes. We have our orders. The mission comes first. The team was splitting, divided by duty and conscience. Outside, the first light of dawn began to streak the sky. What happened next occurred with the speed and clarity that only exists in moments of crisis. Intelligence had been wrong about the Taliban commander, but right about one thing. The village was indeed in contested territory. The first RPG hit the building next door, sending shockwaves through their position. "Contact!" shouted Private Rodriguez from his watch position. "Multiple hostiles approaching from the east." Hayes made his decision. "Defensive positions. Prepare to withdraw southeast to extraction point." But withdrawal meant abandoning the captives to either death by crossfire or recapture by their traffickers. Autumn looked at the faces around her, the terrified children, the women with hollow eyes who had already endured unimaginable suffering. "Marcus," she said, her voice suddenly calm, "help me get these people ready to move." Marcus hesitated for only a second before nodding. "What's your plan, Doc?" "We're taking them out. All of them." Hayes overheard. "That's not the mission, Pierce." Autumn met his gaze directly. "With respect, Captain, it is now." The gunfire outside intensified. Hayes looked at the captives, then back at Autumn. The moment stretched between them like a wire-pulled taut. "You're risking the entire team," he said finally. "I'm a medic," she replied simply. "I don't leave people to die." Something shifted in Hayes's expression. Resignation, respect, or perhaps both. "Connor, get on the radio. Tell command we're coming in with civilians. Reeves, Rodriguez, secure a route to the extraction point. The rest of you, prepare these people to move." The next 40 minutes were a blur of tactical movements, suppressive fire, and Autumn working feverishly to stabilize the weakest captives for transport. They moved as a unit, the team forming a protective bubble around the civilians as they made their way toward the extraction point. The Taliban fighters pursued them through the valley, determined not to lose their captives. When one of the young girls collapsed, unable to continue, Autumn handed her medical pack to Private Malik and lifted the child onto her back without breaking stride. 200 meters to extraction, Hayes called out as they crested a small rise. That's when the ambush hit them, a withering crossfire from positions hidden in the rocks ahead. Hayes went down first, a bullet tearing through his shoulder. Connor dragged him behind cover as the rest of the team returned fire. They were pinned down with no clear path forward, and hostiles closing in from behind. The extraction helicopters were circling overhead, but couldn't land under such heavy fire. Autumn looked at their position, a shallow depression offering minimal cover, surrounded on 3 sides. The captives huddled together, terror etched on their faces. Marcus was down to his last magazine, and Rodriguez was applying a field dressing to his own leg wound. She made a decision. "Give me a weapon and covering fire," she told Marcus. "I'm going to clear a path to that ridgeline. Once I do, move everyone straight to the extraction point." "That's suicide, Doc," Marcus argued, but his eyes told her he understood. "It's the only play we have." She checked the rifle Marcus handed her, then looked at each team member in turn. "On my mark." What Autumn Pierce did next would later be described in the classified mission report as actions above and beyond the call of duty. She moved from cover, drawing enemy fire, while systematically eliminating Taliban positions that blocked their escape route. Despite sustaining 2 gunshot wounds, she continued advancing, creating the corridor her team needed to evacuate the civilians. By the time the helicopters touched down at the extraction point, Autumn had single-handedly neutralized 7 enemy combatants and was still providing covering fire from an exposed position nearly 100 meters away. Marcus had to physically drag her into the helicopter as they lifted off. In the medical evacuation that followed, as field surgeons worked to save her life, Captain Hayes made a decision of his own. The mission had gone sideways in every possible way. They had failed to capture their original target, disobeyed direct orders, and nearly lost half the team. But they had saved 15 innocent lives. As Autumn drifted in and out of consciousness, Hayes leaned close to her ear. "That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen," he said quietly, "but I'm recommending you for the Medal of Honor." In her delirium, Autumn managed a small smile. "Not foolish," she whispered, "necessary." 3 days later, when she awoke in the military hospital in Germany, Hayes was gone, reassigned suddenly to a desk position at the Pentagon, and the paperwork for her Medal of Honor recommendation was nowhere to be found. Chapter 3: The Reckoning. The silence in the Delacorte Veterans Club ballroom felt electric, charged with the weight of revelation. Captain Harrington stared at the Medal of Honor in its velvet box, his complexion ashen. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Autumn's gaze remained steady. "From President Matthews in a private ceremony at Walter Reed 18 months ago, after multiple investigations and testimony from my team members finally forced the truth to light." Rebecca Winters had moved closer, comprehension dawning on her face. "You're that medic, the one from the Kunar Valley rescue." A murmur rippled through the crowd as others began to make the connection. The story had eventually made it to the press. A classified mission gone wrong, heroism buried by bureaucracy, lives saved but credit denied. "The same," Autumn confirmed, "though you won't find my name in most of those reports." Elaine Montgomery, who had questioned Autumn's presence earlier, now stood frozen with her champagne glass halfway to her lips. Her husband, Admiral Montgomery, looked equally stunned. Autumn turned to address the room at large, her voice calm but carrying. "I'm not here for recognition. I received that," she gestured to the medal, "though it took 3 years of fighting the system to get it. I'm here because there are others like me, men and women whose service has been minimized, buried, or denied." Captain Harrington found his voice. "Ms. Pierce, these accusations aren't accusations, Captain. They're documented facts. Operation Whiteout, as it was classified, was deliberately misreported. The rescue of those trafficking victims was attributed to a different unit altogether. My team was sworn to silence. Our commanding officers were transferred to separate posts." She reached into her blazer again and removed a folder, placing it beside the medal. "This contains testimony from all surviving members of my team, including Captain Hayes, who risked his career to finally tell the truth." Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Winters stepped forward. "I remember when this story broke, the Pentagon initially denied everything." "Yes," Autumn nodded, "until Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves went to the Washington Post with evidence that couldn't be ignored. He sacrificed his military career to ensure the truth came out." A tall man in his early 30s rose from a table near the back of the room. His dress uniform identified him as a Marine captain. "Eric would have been here tonight if he could," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm Eric Connor. I was the lieutenant who initially followed orders and told Autumn to leave that sick child behind." Connor walked slowly to join Autumn at the central table.
What she's not telling you is that after saving those hostages and nearly dying in the process, she was discharged on a technicality. Her commanding officers buried her heroism because it exposed the failures in intelligence and chain of command decisions. The room had gone completely still. These were people who understood military protocol, who lived by codes of honor and duty. The implications of what they were hearing struck at the foundation of everything they believed about the institutions they served. Admiral Montgomery cleared his throat. "If what you're saying is true, Miss Pierce, why bring this to us? Why not take it to the current military leadership?"
Autumn smiled sadly. "Because you are the current military leadership, Admiral. This room contains 6 generals, 4 admirals, and 12 high-ranking officers who sit on boards that determine military policy. You're the ones who can ensure this doesn't happen to others." She gestured toward a wall of the ballroom where photographs of previous honorees hung in gilded frames. How many faces are missing from that wall? How many stories have been buried because they didn't fit neatly into official narratives? How many women? How many people of color? How many who served honorably but inconveniently? Captain Harrington's hand trembled slightly as he touched the edge of the velvet box. "What exactly are you asking for, Miss Pierce?" "Transparency," she answered simply. "A formal review of denied commendations from the last 15 years. Recognition for those who deserve it, regardless of how messy or politically inconvenient their heroism might be." Rebecca Winters stepped forward, her decision made. "I'll champion this cause in the Pentagon. As chair of the Military Recognition Committee, I have the authority to initiate such a review." Eric Connor nodded firmly. "And I'll provide whatever testimony is needed." The momentum in the room was shifting. Other officers began to stand, offering support, asking questions, engaging with the uncomfortable truth Autumn had placed before them. Admiral Montgomery approached her, his earlier dismissiveness replaced with solemn respect. "Miss Pierce, I owe you an apology, both for tonight and for the system that failed you." Autumn accepted with a gracious nod. "It's not about me, Admiral. It's about making sure service and sacrifice are honored equally, no matter who performs them." As the evening continued, the formal award ceremony transformed into something more authentic, a genuine dialogue about recognition, accountability, and change. The velvet box containing the Medal of Honor remained at the center table, a powerful reminder of both failure and possibility. Later, as the crowd began to disperse, Autumn found herself alone with Rebecca Winters on the stone terrace overlooking the Annapolis harbor. "You could have gone to the press again," Rebecca observed, watching the moonlight on the water. "Made a public spectacle. Why this approach instead?" Autumn leaned against the balustrade. "Because real change doesn't come from public shaming. It comes from helping good people recognize blind spots they didn't know they had." Rebecca studied her with newfound respect. "You know, there's a position opening on my staff. We need someone with first-hand experience to help reshape recognition protocols." A small smile touched Autumn's lips. "Are you offering me a job, Colonel?" "I'm suggesting a partnership. Your experience, my access. Together we might actually fix this broken system from within." Autumn considered this unexpected turn. 5 years ago, she had been a combat medic fighting for her life in an Afghan valley. 3 years ago, she had been battling military bureaucracy for recognition that should have been automatic. 18 months ago, she had received her Medal of Honor in a ceremony so private it might as well have been classified. And tonight, she had come full circle, no longer fighting against the system, but being invited to help rebuild it. "I'll consider it," she said finally. "On one condition." "Name it." "The first case we review is Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves. He sacrificed everything to tell the truth." Rebecca nodded. Agreed. As they sealed their arrangement with a handshake, Autumn glanced back through the ballroom windows. The space that had initially felt so unwelcoming now seemed transformed. The metal still sat on the central table, catching the light from the chandeliers, a small object that carried the weight of both tragedy and triumph. She had come here tonight not knowing what to expect, carrying nothing but truth and a small velvet box. She would leave with something she hadn't anticipated, the chance to ensure that others like her would never again have to fight for recognition they had earned with blood and courage. "Ready to go back in?" Rebecca asked. Autumn nodded, straightening her shoulders. "I've been ready for 5 years." Together they walked back into the ballroom, not as outsiders and insiders, but as allies in a cause bigger than both of them. The whispers that had once questioned her presence now carried a different tone: respect, contemplation, and the quiet acknowledgement of change beginning. If this story moved you, if you believe in the power of truth to create change and the importance of recognizing courage wherever it's found, subscribe to our channel now. Your subscription helps us continue bringing these stories of hidden heroism and human resilience to light. There are countless untold stories waiting to be shared, countless voices that deserve to be heard. Join our community of listeners who believe that every act of courage matters, every truth deserves its moment, and every hero, no matter how inconvenient, deserves recognition. The world changes one story at a time. Be part of that change with us.